regular people or ordinary people. I found that even if like the man who lost his father, the first scene of the movie, they asked, "Are you going to the church?" And he said, "No, yeah, yes, but I'm a member of union." So member of union is a big thing. So ordinary people include like those people who doesn't care, who don't care about like social movement.
Right.
Or that woman who was social worker. So obviously she was supporting working class people. And then like I found it was not just ordinary people, it was people who were very active in social movement. I found this.
Yeah, I think it's true. I don't think there are enough people that are politically aware, active, or involved in political processes. Mr. Boudreau, by the way, in the film, as an actor, we were all happy to know, and he's now a senator in Ottawa.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Mehdi?
I just want to ask about this part of the movie,
We can go to Human and then come back to you. Okay, Human?
My question is about like the film industry and your experience. So the Art Council and National Film Board, how would they have picked their members? Like the people who were in decision making, power, like who would have like given them power? The federal government, like wouldn't have been like a democratic process? How did they like make decisions back then when you were
Most of the agencies of the federal government, like the Film Board, the Canada Council, the CBC, and others, operate at arm's length and independently. And it's always created a lot of friction between politicians and the people who run the agencies. But in fact, it's a long established custom that they respect the independence of the agencies. The one agency that has a problem with that is the National Film Board, which, because it doesn't have legislation that makes it separate, is actually an agency within the Department of Canadian Heritage. And I remember one occasion when a previous government, two back, when the normal process of reviewing pay scales for the top executives, I think there were 3 top executives at the Film Board where the approval had to go to the top, i.e. to the Prime Minister. And he said, "No, I won't sign it." He's got to sign it. You know, it's all the kind of process, but he said, "No, I'm not going to sign it." Well, it stalled there for 2 or 3 weeks, and finally he did sign the approval to, just do their cost of living increase or whatever the hell it was. It wasn't very much. But that's the only case. And the board finds its own talented people and moves them up and so on. The government does appoint the board members, some of whom are established by, like the Film Board. There has to be somebody from the because it was established in 1939 and the law has never been changed. They have to have at least 2 people from the military, somebody who's in the civil service, and or a deputy minister or 2, and a couple of other things like that. Quite bizarre.
Is that at the National Film or at the CFC?
At Film Board.
Okay.
Telefilm is a very small board. There were only 6 of us, I think 6 or 7. I was the chairman for a while when it was just before it became Telefilm. And I think we were 6 or 7 altogether. And there were only 2 members. One was the head of the Film Board, sat on it, by virtue of his position, his or her position. And there was somebody else that had I guess it was Spencer, was it? The member of the
Yes,
board.
Spencer was-
As the director of the Film Development Corporation itself. The other people were all citizens.
Okay. Okay, Mehdi.
I want to ask about the way they mentioned torturing people. When they got the guy and they tried to convince him we're going to shoot you in 3 days. And I want to know if those days the execution were on in Canada?
No.
Because it seems to be, or maybe the public that didn't aware of that one, but it seems to be that guy believing. When you believe it, it means something is going on in the things that it makes you believe that they're going to shoot you, they're going to kill you. So
I think those, I mean, and it was referred to earlier, the kinds of humiliation that all of them were put to one way or another. They certainly felt humiliated. That was a real threat and a serious one. But at the time the film was made, they'd already passed the law banning capital punishment. So it was not possible to hang anybody or shoot anybody in this country. But I must say, if you're sitting where he sat in the film, I'd believe it myself, you know, because it's the guards that are deciding that, not the Minister of Justice or you know, the federal cabinet.
you disappear.
Yeah, that's right. It's very difficult to hide something like that because it would be illegal, of course.
Okay. Amir.
Yes, I'm a little bit confused about when you talk about NFB and when you mention Michael Snow and experimental movies. It just I got a little bit confused. NFB, for example, here produce or provide funding for experimental movies, or for example for marginalized groups, or for example, because I know, for example, in French. There is a funding that supports, for example, women or supports immigrants or something like this. I'm just wondering, NFE is, when you talk about experimental, is something like also provide support. For example, if Mustafa is a film movie director wants to create a movie here, can he go to NFE and ask for money? I'm just want to.
I think they've taken such a broad range of subjects that they've actually made films on. Most of them have to do with either with animation, which has been a very strong stream at the Film Board, or with social change. And there have been a number of series of films that dealt with social change. There was a whole series. In fact, the first time I met John Kennedy was in Newfoundland, where they were shooting film on Fogo Island. And they simply had people talk about the problems they had and so on in one community. Then you'd go to the next community on Fogo Island and show the film and talk about the problem. And it actually, seeing the films about themselves, made the people rise up and sort of take control of what was happening to their communities on this island that Joey Smallwood was going to take them all off and you know, bring them all to St. John's, where they're cheaper to look after. And it was but the Film Board always had that kind of social purpose in a number of the films that it made. I've sort of lost track of what they've been doing recently, but I'm sure a lot of they show up pretty regularly at Oscar night with a short or a documentary of some kind. And they show up in hot dogs, I imagine, very regularly. You know more about this than I do.
If you're talking about at this time, if you were Mustafa and you wanted to make a film, you would try and get hired by the National Film Board. And you would go on staff at the National Film Board. And then once you were hired by the Film Board, you could pitch your particular
project, or you could get
So
involved in other
we need to
people.
become a member of national
No, you
staff.
became,
I'm
you
an
were
employee.
staff.
Employee.
You were staff.
We have to be a staff.
You were staff. And they had permanent staff and they had contractual, and, which was freelance staff. And if you were freelance, you didn't have any of the benefits. And there were so many people who were freelance without benefits that we called them the phony freelancers. That was a whole thing. And the movement was to get the phony freelancers employed permanently so that they could get benefits. But in those days, you couldn't bring a project to the National Film Board. You had to be on staff. And they generated all their own projects. Whereas at the CFDC, they didn't have any filmmakers on staff. They just had personnel that filled
Yeah,
out the
money.
budgets and, pushed the paper around.
Yeah. We gave
And
out
followed
money.
up on the contracts, but nobody at the CFDC made films. So the CFDC had staff which read scripts and looked at budgets and vetted the films. So everybody brought their projects to the CFDC, and the CFDC in the beginning was the board. There wasn't any staff. There was an executive director and the secretary, the général.
That's right.
And then as it got bigger, they hired staff to do the administration work. But it was just an administrative office the way it is today. There are no filmmakers at Telefilm.
The other important project that the Film Board started and never finished, but they took on, they planned out about 6 major documentaries that were going to look at people who changed the law of the country. There was a woman who had been married to a farmer in Alberta, and they divorced late in their marriage, and she was left with nothing. And she fought it all the way up to the Supreme Court and won, and that's changed the whole basis for how the wife's role in the ownership of a farm or a family's enterprise was going to be dealt with in the future. There was that. There was Mary Tuax, who was a Métis or an Indian who had the problem about being on reserve or not on reserve because she married a white man and lost her privileges as a native. And then there was Morgentaler. And they made the documentary about Henry Morgentaler and his campaign to get abortions available for women who wanted to have abortions. And it was quite a big fight at the Film Board. I was on the board of the Film Board at the time. And we were really pushing the director, Francois Massarola, to finish the series because we wanted to get it distributed. Nobody wanted to take the Morgentaler by itself. And I said, yes, but if you get all these other 5 films going, you'd have a case to make. And for getting it broadcast on the CBC, the CBC was saying, no, you're not going to do one-offs. So that was just something else the Film Board did, which is very interesting.
Okay.
But Telefilm was finally got property financed, and after I became assistant deputy minister in Ottawa, and that was, and then they started making much more substantial films and better ones.
Okay. I'll go to Nazgul.
I have 2 questions.
Okay.
First one is, in one part of the movie, the prisoner said, I want to hear French radio. It seems that the guards are Anglophone, or the military is Anglophone, and maybe that's the reason that they are so hard on Quebecois. Is that correct? Because
I don't think so, because I'm sure the guards were all Francophones as well.
okay,
Almost
so why
positive.
they were hearing?
I don't know why the radio was set on the wrong station, but obviously it was. But at that point, I don't think you could, unless the guards were doing it to irritate the prisoners. That's entirely possible.
Okay.
I don't know.
And the military usually, is it under federal power? I mean, my question is actually the military can be from, for example, they can be from Ottawa going to Quebec.
Montreal, yeah. They were the army is federal.
Okay.
There's no
Provincial.
militia that's provincial.
Okay, but usually in Quebec they have to talk.
They have
French,
to,
yes.
yeah, they have to.
My second question is regarding what we are seeing from outside in last in half a season that we have passed. It seems that the Canadian Anglophones are more mixed with USA people, and they have very mutual feeling, and sometimes you don't see that feeling of as a nationality that they really respect to be Canadian for themselves. You know what I mean? They easily go to Hollywood and they simply just will be American, and they never get back, or they never try to have a organization to help other Canadian inside the industry, inside the Canada. But Quebecois, it seems they feel more like Canadian, even if, do you know what I'm saying? The movie, the industry, that everything, they're trying to be more like, everything we've seen, it seems they are more feeling like we are Canadian, or, so it's a very
hard to
strange
figure.
feeling,
Yeah.
you know?
More
I know.
Canadians, you want.
Yeah, we're Canadians, yeah.
I know. I feel very Canadian. I'm a very strong nationalist, but I don't think and I think Quebecers feel very strongly about being Quebecers. Some are federal in their beliefs. You know, the folks at Power Corporation certainly are. And there are a number of very strong Federalists who believe that, like the wonderful comedian who said, you know, what he really believes in is a strong Quebec inside a united Canada. You know? And he gets everybody laughing about it, but in fact, the conundrum is always there. It always has been. And I think the Anglophones, by and large, in Canada don't pay an awful lot of attention to Quebec unless they're involved personally in some way or another.
So basically, many actresses or actors or directors, Canadian ones, they immigrated to Hollywood and USA.
Some do.
And
Yeah.
some of them.
Yeah.
So and most of them, it seems, it was because the lack of any basically help in Canadian industry, in movie industry. So when they went there and they became rich, most of them, how come they never kind of make their debt back to the industry?
Well, some did, I must say. Sidney Newman came back from the UK. Kotcheff made a number of films, large in Canada, partly because the money was here for it, and partly because they were based on books by Mordecai Richler. Not only Dudley Kravitz, but also what's his name? It also was shown in Cannes.
Jacob Tutu.
No, it wasn't Jacob Tutu. It was another. Anyway, and Norman Jewison, of course, is one of the movers and shakers behind the establishment of the Canadian Film Centre. So he has paid back. You know, he is paying back, and he's very keen. But I think there's also been a shift in the generation. Once there was more money in telefilm, and there were more films being made, you get people like Adam Egoyan, and Cronenberg was always there from early days. There have been some other great young filmmakers, yes, Dawson, others, who are staying here and making their films here. The question is where do they get them distributed, and who's got the money, and who invests in them. That's
Okay.
Inevitably, you end up following the money. Tough, but I think there's enough happening in Canada, Anglo-Canada, and in Quebec, Canada, to keep things pretty robust. You know, pretty exciting. Have to kick the Americans out.
All right, I'll go to Huma.
Well, I have two questions. One is that, so you said that about this story, there were 3 scripts. So one was accepted. The other 2, what is the procedure? Giving back to them to revise it or not? Like, what did you do? Because under what ground did you reject them? I mean, how? Because there wasn't anything like obscene or like
No.
ground for censorship. So what did you do?
We just said no, and luckily we didn't have much money, so that part we just say we didn't have enough money to do all three, and barely enough to do one. And we were actually a very small player. So in the financing of it, I think the film was probably made for, I can't remember how much it was, but it wasn't very much. It was probably a couple, $2 or $2.5 million, something like that. Of which the CFDC would probably contribute $500,000, something like that. But we didn't have very much, you know. So that would restrict things. So we just say no, and the producer would be grumpy, and the script writers would be griping away and be unhappy about it. But there you go. Go and do something else.
With Michael Brooks, as far as I read, like we watched two of his works as a cinematographer here, Morocco, Antoine, and Last Week. So you said that there was a department in NFB, or like there was like a group associated to it, which would train these people to become cinematographers, to become like sound technician. So does it still exist,
It's not so much training, it's sort of training on the job. They take them in because they're interested in being involved in the film business. They sort of work their way up. As I'm sure Bro did, he probably started as a gaffer or something like that, you know. And so it's one of those things that work. Guys like Tom Daly, who died just a little over a year and a half, 2 years ago, went from university straight to the film board in 1940. He just got as an assistant, and he was lucky, mind you. The first film he worked on as an assistant to the editor won an Oscar that year, so that was a good start. And he ended up working there for over 40 years, and he either directed or produced 300 films. And he was sort of the residing genius of the place. You know, he never the head guy, but he touched nearly every film that happened there.
Also in those days, there were no film schools in Canada,
No,
period.
no, yeah.
There was no place to learn to do this
That's true.
except at the CBC and the NFB. Now I'm quite sure that the kids come out of film school and they've made films and they know if they're interested in editing or camera or what. So it's a different scene now than it was then.
In fact, at first I went to York University from the Canada Council in 1970 because it was the first faculty that had film, dance, music, theater, and the visual arts. And that was the first film. And of course, 3 of the people teaching there are graduates of the National Film Board. Jim Beveridge, Mark Rosen, and somebody else. So, interesting. It was a real incubator of a place.
Okay. Tyus?
Yeah, I was thinking how to formulate my question. I think it might be interpreted as a generic question, but I want to do it like I want to escape that.
I'll give you a generic answer.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. So
Okay.
I want to, the reason for that is that like my question, there is a condition that in my question that some of the art, like what is the role of making a movie for reasons other than entertainment, right? If we consider an artist making a movie for like high values, let's say, if I may, let's say like justice, quality, and those things, and this was obviously reflected in the comments in a sense. And what is the reality here? Like showing the prisoner, just the prisoners, focusing on them, or like showing a less biased reality. And that's not just the question of the content of the movie; it's also the question of the movie itself. How should be the movie for an artist to be effective? And my question is regarding that. Like, that it seems to me there are 3 different models that an artist could make a movie to impact more effectively. One is that to make movies for specific audience, right? To like more of a festival kind of like Cannes Festival, elite-minded people, like let's say people here maybe, I'm not sure, but you know, like we don't want to maybe, but we are kind of, but you know, like one approach is that. not the masses itself. The other two are regarding the masses, but one is like more of a direct message to the masses, like kind of a movie like this, because it shows that injustice in a very, real and, presented that way at least, right? The direct messaging system for the masses, but I'm not sure how effective is that. And the third one is like in a way that the masses would enjoy, but it's kind of in a more metaphoric subconscious level, when maybe the content is about something else, but some elite-minded people would kind of critique that or review that as if it is saying something very important that shakes the capitalism or something, but nobody gets that in a sense. But the message is there for all of maybe in a subconscious level for everyone. I just want to know, specifically in your position, that you kind of saw the impact of all of those three models, probably making movies, directors of them. Which one do you think is more effective? Which one has reached better to their goal, if I may, which is making a change for the society, making a change for the culture, making or showing realities better, impacting people?
Hard question, but I think I can say that the film board, with its documentaries on social issues, has been outstanding, and actually has had an impact which has changed laws and practices and attitudes very profoundly. And my wife, who's actually American, but she's half American, half Canadian now, spent a summer once when she was in college, in the university. She spent a few months in the middle of Nevada and teaching high school kids, trying to give them a different experience than they would get. And this is in the middle of nowhere, mostly native children. And she got films from the National Film Board. They shipped them in, and she said it was great. A, it was entertaining, and B, it was educational, and it was informative. So these kinds of things were actually very helpful. Mm-hmm. There are certain kind of documentaries which we always used to call them, saddle making in Alberta, or something like that, which is very how-to kind of film. But there are very few of those, if any. But telefilm has tried. They have to follow filmmakers, so basically it depends what scripts people come up with. The hardest thing is always finding a good script. It really is. I mean, you get tons of scripts, and there just aren't that many that are really good, that are ready to go, or that are going to make a film, or be the basis for a good film if you put a good cast and crew around it. I think a lot of those barriers are breaking down between what the film board does and what telefilm does, and what independents do, and so on. So that's probably a good thing. But the different kinds of films you mentioned happen largely because, or only if, somebody writes a good script. That's it.
Just a short follow-up on that. Like, what was your own experience as a artist? Have you had have you made movies like in any of those categories or in any?
I can't think of any at the moment because I haven't gone back over the sort of track that we had at the time I was there. I was there on the board for about 10 years actually, until right through the 70s. And there were some good films. They were successful financially, and but a lot of them were just dogs. I would get so annoyed with Canadians. The number of Canadian producers, they would get they put in an application for funds and say, yes, it's got very strong possibilities. It needs some work on the script. so come back to us when we try script. But here's something to get started. And the first thing they do is go out and sort of rent a limousine to drive around it. You know, I mean, it was just kind of infuriating that they would not bear down on the really important thing, which is getting a good script. So,
Okay.
it's always a problem. People are always a problem.
So the last question before we go to the probably discussions, Ali. Yep.
It's not about the movie, just said about what I mean, when you're talking about the movie, you mentioned very nice things, interesting. And it was a jail, South Bay or somewhere like that, and the door was open and
Yes. Yes.
I have a good experience like that. Once in Iran, capital city, they wanted to put me to the south, and it was a new year. In the south terminal was like crowded, thousand and thousand people, and I missed them. And then I go and I'm looking for them because I will get free, right? I'm going to get free. So I'm looking for them and I find them. So suddenly they say, where are you going? Okay, and another time was in the Greece. We're in the jail in the middle of nowhere, middle of the Mediterranean Sea, in a little island, and we have to go to work in the back. When our work finished, we have to call them and open the door, we go in. Yeah, and I read a book about one psychiatrist in Russia. He let the prisoners go out to work in the back and trust them, and it was educational, right? I wonder there, and you mentioned prison, the jail, what kind of jail was that? Because the people down there, they don't have a hope if they run away, right? Where they want to go?
They can't. Nobody ever escaped, interestingly enough, because because it was all bush all around for hundreds and hundreds of acres, hundreds of square miles, and all you had to do if somebody was missing and had tried to run away, you put 2 guards on the road, 2 guards on the railway, 2 guards on the river, and you'll get them for sure. Nobody ever escaped. But it was a largely self-supporting. It had, there was a big agricultural component. They made things like mail bags and license plates, and they were busy. They had opportunities to learn crafts and so on. And there were a number of prisoners there, very interesting, who, if they'd finished it was always 2 years less a day, or they might have 2 consecutive sentences. And when they'd get out, and they'd be released, and first thing they would do would be take a brick and throw it through some plate glass window of the store. They'd be arrested for break and enter, and sent right back. And I would be happy because they get 3 meals a day, and they had a job they liked, and they had a team of horses that they worked with. And I knew a couple of guys that they were happy in the jail because they had something to do, and they had security.
Yeah.
They had meal.
They had meals.
Yeah.
That's right. They didn't have porridge like the guys in this film. It surprised me. Usually they feed.
It was not a school like educational.
No. But you learned something. There was a blacksmith shop, and they did plumbing, and they did handyman jobs. They kept the rink in the wintertime and looked after the tennis courts for the staff and families, and maintained the school. I went to school there for 5 years.
Okay. So it's now 9:52. We usually have discussions after the question and answer. Thank you very much. So we